Hello, Dale Peterson with Premium Ag Solutions. We're going to do a video with Nate Mayer, the Northwest Iowa agronomist for Beck's. We're going to start talking about rootworm. It's kind of a hot topic that most of the customers have talked about. Nate, what is the biggest concern you have going into this year?
So right now we've had several years in a row where we've had high or low ag mortality, basically because of what we run into with our dry late May and June, which coincides with early rootworm hatch. So for me, it's just the sheer amount of pressure in the years that we've had corn on corn. So when we start talking corn on corn, especially with input prices, we have to determine whether or not this is a viable source. So we start looking at nodal root scores previous in like 2021 to be evaluating the efficacy of the traits that we're using on our farms. So when I deal with corn on corn, the one thing I like to mention is the fact that we have choices, because we do carry fully traded options from Smart Stacks. We have fully traded Chrome, and we have Duracade 1 and 2 events. So all three of those options have two modes of action, above and below ground. Now, it's very geographic specific to where we have resistance built up in these with these type of products, basically located by geography and what they've been exposed to in the past. But the one thing we got to consider, and I've done moving forward, is rotating some of these traits through. Now, traits are a good way to combat rootworm events, but there's also some other things when we start talking about long periods of corn with soil applied insecticide, dry being the favorite, liquid being the next most important. But I'd say one of the things that we got to first identify, are we dealing with westerns or northerns?
And in using an insecticide, that should be used in conjunction with a trait in long-term corn on corn?
For long-term corn on corn, yes, because we've already developed resistance to each trait on its own. When we start seeing these dual mode of action, we tend to slow down the resistance trait. So when we start looking at 3 to 5 year plus corn on corn, I think soil applied insecticides strongly needs to be considered as an option to help mitigate that risk. The other thing I use to kind of gauge guys' committal to it is, are they doing it for grain, or are they doing it for livestock, or do they have an option to rotate out? Because obviously crop rotation is going to be #1 defense against rootworm resistance.
When we see the corn rootworm, what's the most identifying features?
So with northern, which is the rootworm variant that has extended diapause, that is the all green corn rootworm beetle that we see as soon as they emerge. Then when we deal with the westerns, traditionally the males are solid color, a little bit smaller in size, and the females have the 3 distinct black stripes on their back. And what we do see is we'll see westerns emerge slightly ahead of northerns, but that emergence date is real critical when we should start evaluating whether or not we've had severe rootworm feeding or the larva feeding on those plants.
Has there been any efficacy differences in the species to the traits or the insecticides?
So right now, northern is only emitting extended diapause. With western, we have different pockets in different regions that are resistant to different traits. Now, all 3 of the traits that we're using currently right now are cry proteins, so they can develop resistance quite rapidly if we don't start rotating those traits through. But when we start talking about soil applied insecticide, I like to do the same thing, is I like to rotate between different insecticide options to help slow and combat some of that resistance down.
Very good. If you have any more questions about corn rootworm, feel free to contact myself or Nate. Thank you very much.